Back everyone. Today's TechSmart has a little bit of a weather twist. That's why we're sitting down in the Weather Center. We're joined this morning by Michael Kozar talking about how we're using technology when it comes to hurricane forecasting. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
Yeah, and so we're talking about sort of a new system analysis with the Hurricane Wind Analysis System.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit what goes into this kind of in layman's terms of how you can actually apply this to hurricane forecasting?
Sure. So what we do is we take a look at the storms both in real time and after the event, and we pull in all the data that we can get. So that includes planes that fly through or over the storm, ground observations coming from airports and other people's sensors, and then also from up into space, satellites beam down and are able to detect wind speeds over the ocean as well. So we use all of that information to kind of come up with an objective analysis of what the entire wind field of a storm looks like. And most people are only usually familiar with maximum sustained winds. That's usually what's reported. You know, like Category 3 hurricanes, Saffir-Simpson scale, 120 mile per hour peak winds.
Right.
But if you think about it, that's the maximum sustained winds in the entire storm. So very few people are ever going to experience those winds.
Right.
So we analyze the entire storm, the overall structure, and as Sandy and other storms have shown, big storms can cause a lot more damage than you would expect just based on their maximum winds because their wind field's bigger and is affecting more people, is pushing more surge across. So we look at the entire wind field and we give that information to insurance companies, reinsurance companies, in an effort to try to understand or to give them an idea of what their risks and anticipated loss may be.
Yeah, very interesting for sure. What goes into analyzing the storms? We were talking a little bit, you mentioned Sandy, but of course a little bit more recent in memory was the threat that Erica posed.
Sure.
You actually said that you were in charge of analyzing that system and retrieving the data from that storm. So what did that process look like just a couple weeks ago?
So Erica was a little bit of an uncertain event, as I'm sure everyone's well aware of.
Yeah.
The models didn't particularly do the greatest of jobs.
That's why current observation is just that much more important to understand what's going to happen in the near term.
Exactly. So it ended up being a prolific rain producer, especially in islands like Dominica in the Lesser Antilles, and continued to produce rain, but it just interacted with so much land and coming across Hispaniola, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and had a pretty unfavorable environment with some high shear, had some dry air and training into the system to the point where it was difficult for the storm ever to get going.
Right.
And for some reason the models thought it was going to go a little bit further north, and that's something that we're definitely going to look into to try and figure out why the models were doing one thing when something else ended up happening entirely.
Exactly. It kept churning west, and that's why it interacted with so much land, and pretty much the reason why Erica ended up having a demise early on here. You're seeing some of the details of this really interesting project that's going on right here in Tallahassee, actually. And again, compiling all this data with observations relative to the storm center and, of course, relative to that entire wind field. Very interesting for sure. Of course, peak hurricane season coming up here in just a week, and we're still keeping our eyes on the tropics as well. And it's great that it's not a solo event. We got eyes all over Tallahassee monitoring the tropics. Michael, thanks so much for being here this morning, providing some very useful information. Stick around. We got hometown weather coming up right after the break.